Hello, hello, hello. Tyler James streaming live here with y'all. Hope you're doing well. Uh, if you have questions, comments, or anything that you want to hear me and the guest that I'm about to bring on talk about, please don't hesitate to jump right in and participate. But without further ado, I want to bring on my guest today for a great conversation. My guest today has a ton of experience. He's one of the creative minds behind Mythopoeia and is the publisher of fantastic comic series like Skies of Fire and Glow. He also does RPG games and just multi-talented creator with a ton of experience to bring to the show. So welcome to ComixLaunch, Ray Chou. How you doing, Ray?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Tyler.
Yeah, so you are back on Kickstarter with one of multiple sort of long-running multi-issue series that you've been able to crowdfund. What can you tell us about the project that is live on Kickstarter right now, which is Glow 1
Yeah,
through
so
7?
we're back for Glow number 7. It is the 7th issue of Glow, so the third book, the third comic book of 4 for book 2. It is called subtitled Hearts and Minds. It's a lighter issue with the heroes of Glow approaching this city called Arcadi and coming up with this kind of crazy puppet scheme to tell about the woe about their fallen town to hopefully win over the people of this new and strange city. And the B story follows these cultists, the kind of antagonists, the Stonehands, and kind of goes more into their culture. They're kind of like frat bros, but with like a weird cult twist. And yeah, it's a lighter issue. It's humorous. It's funny. It's kind of like a pause in the series in terms of like the downbeats, because a lot of Glow so far has been a lot of go go go, a lot of dealing with the emotional ramifications. So this one's a little bit softer. It's a moment to decompress before getting back into it. And this is our first issue. We in about a year, or a little bit over a year. We didn't publish an issue of Glow last year, which was one of my big mistakes, I think, on crowdfunding, because the previous campaign we did was for issues 5 and 6. I decided to do 2 at once last time, and that was not a good idea from a number of perspectives. One of them being that I didn't have a new issue to show last year, which was unfortunate. But we're back. I'm really excited about Glow. I'm re-energized about the project since the fall, basically since September. I've been really hammering it creatively and just sort of trying to get momentum back in the series. I had writer's block for a long time as to like where the series should go, and I think I've since like sort of conquered that. I have a great roadmap. This issue is great. Issue number 8, the next one, I think is going to be a real banger. And the next couple are kind of planned, and I'm writing every day more or less, and we're just really excited to be back on the creative side of things, and really excited to launch this Kickstarter and to publish a new issue.
Yeah, so there's a lot, and I see a big heart just came through for that as you're talking about, and I think you've already delved in some things that I want to dive deeper on. Things like sticking with a series over the long haul. What happens when you feel that getting stuck, and how do you get unstuck, and a number of other things, and but as this is it's kind of cool that you mentioned this is sort of like a, I don't know, catch your breath style episode before jumping back into the main heart of the narrative. I was just did my first comic book convention in a long time, and so I realized how rusty I was at just pitching series that have sort of been in my head or in my world for years and years and years, but to most of the people walking by, these are actually brand new things. So like, how do you, what's the pitch for Glow itself, just as a series as a whole? And the opportunity on Kickstarter is always to not just reward and bring back the past backers, but to get new people jumping on board. So
Yeah, for
how do you
sure.
sort of pitch that, this book?
Thanks for roping me back in, Tyler. That's a great point. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Glow, Glow is a coming of age story set in a world devastated by magic. So, the conceit of the world is that there was this ancient civilization called the Nigerian Empire. They built these massive towers that acted as giant mana repositories, essentially. The glow that the series refers to is the blue iridescent pure magical substance, kind of the energy of the world. So they built these massive towers, transformed the world into a verdant paradise, and then one day the towers fell, and that caused a magical apocalypse. So it's sort of like a post-apocalyptic techno fantasy is what I call it. The series follows a couple of kids kind of hundreds of years into the future who are born into this post-apocalyptic world. Koken, the younger brother, kind of intuitively understands how to put together the old magic technology, the runes, and the various things. And when others find out about that ability, it sort of kicks off the series. So in the first arc, issues 1 through 4, we kind of follow them as people learn about their abilities and the aftermath of that. And the second book finds them sort of on the run, exiled from their hometown, which has been occupied by this marauding band of cultists called the Stonehands, and it's led by Mork Stonehand. He's got a magical stone golem that he controls with a magical stone gauntlet. And it's sort of the way I envision the series is kind of a mix of like Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind, kind of crossed with Avatar: The Last Airbender, and sprinkling in some like Final Fantasy influences in there with the magical technology, the guns and golems and stuff like that. So if any of those things are appealing to the audience, appealing to you, I think you should check out Glow.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely feels like something that it gives a lot of those same vibes of some of the things that you just mentioned, and the art is great, covers and everything. Just high quality presentation, top to bottom, is something that I think you've been able to sort of have associated with your brand, which I think is really good. I saw Charlie Stickney the other day over on Twitter was like shouting out creators that have managed to serialize a number of or serialize issues and projects on Kickstarter, which I think when I think about the early days of Kickstarter, and I've been going back through the ComixLaunch archives as I've been, we're coming up or we're hitting 10-year anniversary for the podcast, and I've been putting together this planner, like a physical planner for sort of celebrate the 10 years of ComixLaunch. And so going through the archive, doing a lot of stuff, but just it's reminding me of all of like the some of the preconceived notions and just common sense assumptions about what Kickstarter could and couldn't be for. And I still remember in the early days, like the idea that this was a vehicle for ongoing series and every single issue still wasn't even something that I think was on a lot of creators' radars. They were like, well, let me kickstart the series with the crowdfunding, but the goal ultimately being, let's serialize this in the direct market or other things like that. But you're someone that really did see the power of Kickstarter as a serializing mechanism from the very beginning. Like, what would you say some of the best practices might be for trying to crowdfund not just a single issue, but a series over time?
Yeah. So before I answer that question, I guess I didn't understand the power of serializing, or I didn't. I wish I had that grand vision, but I actually, and my partner Vince, our vision stopped at the first issue. I remember distinctly after we did Skies of Fire #1, and that was a big deal for us. Obviously, it launched our careers, and we were successful enough to get enough money to more or less fund the second issue. And we knew we were able to do that, but we didn't know what else we could do besides that. And I remember having this conversation at Long Beach Comic Con back in the day, and just kind of wondering out loud, like, I have no idea how we're going to release the second issue. Maybe we'll just do like a pre-launch thing on our website. And I was talking to Madeline Holly Rosing of Boston Metaphysical. She's got a campaign out for Morgana right now, and she was like, "Well, why don't you go back to Kickstarter?" And like that seems very obvious to me. And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of a good idea. That seems obvious to me now too.
It's amazing. It is amazing though how many creators, and I'm not, you know, like how many creators who's like, all right, we did this thing worked. Now, how do I do something completely different for the next thing? It was just not. I don't know. Like I think the collective mentality of how crowdfunding would work and what the crowd would tolerate uh, was just it was a different mindset when you first launched Skies of Fire. And so yeah, I mean, you know, it seems obvious now in hindsight, but you're right. Back then, yeah, that would be possible wasn't necessarily obvious to most.
Yeah, for sure. So you know, I think you and I, like, and a lot of those earlier creators, like we kind of had to like forge the path a little bit, right, and just sort of like try things, and I think that's ultimately like part of our legacy and part of the things that I guess I'm proud of in the history of Kickstarter and whatnot. And so to answer your question as to like best practices, I think it really just comes down to fundamentals. So I think, you know, maintaining a mailing list is very important. Communication with your supporters, and not just communication as to like new launches, but what they really want to understand, especially your first couple of supporters, whether they're backers, whether you find them at conventions, is like it's all about like supporting the small creator, right? And like kind of getting into the mindset of like what that means. If you're on Kickstarter, especially in the early days, like the Kickstarter is beyond just the comic book. It's not just a storefront, right? And it's really designed as a sort of a business prospectus or like a film prospectus, and that's kind of like how I learned how to do it because my background is in film. I went to film school as a producer, and I learned how to do like short film prospectuses in film school. So immediately I saw that was essentially the same format as the successful Kickstarters that I saw. So that format really engages whoever's reading it in sort of the behind the scenes, right? Like they want to get invested in you as a creator, and what that means is sort of keeping them updated as to what's going on. And if I think about like the things that I would do differently, or maybe like remind myself, is that like I would remind myself that that's very, very important. A lot of times, even to this day, I think like, oh, you know, I don't want to say anything unless there's good news to be said, right? Unless I'm like launching something, unless like, you know, but that's kind of like the wrong mentality. I think it's important for them, for your audience to understand where you're at, to see that you're making progress, and even like, you know, if you're struggling a little bit, and like what you're struggling with, and kind of communicating with them how the sausage is made, how comics are made. That's really, really, really important to, I think, your core audience, especially if you're just starting out, at least on Kickstarter, and I think on other platforms too. So building that mailing list, being consistently transparent and consistently communicating, I think those are the biggest things to building an audience, to finding some success on it. As far as like serializing, like what I would suggest, my recommendation, which I don't really follow, unfortunately, but you know, if you can be consistent in doing 2 issues or even more a year, like it's a much higher probability of you kind of snowballing and able to consistently build that audience. So if you can be consistent in your releases, consistent in your kind of fulfillment in your schedule, and communicative, I think those are the fundamentals to success. You know, with anything, I feel like whether it's social media, whether it's Kickstarter, like those are the basic building blocks of being a creator, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you know, we talked about some of the ideas of like, all right, this is the ideal, or but also that, hey, you know, even if we are knowledgeable, we might not always like hit the high mark or do exactly what, you know, the most optimized way to do things are, but having that propensity towards action, and getting stuff out there, even if it's not like the most planned out thing. I think a lot of creators make the mistake of just like sitting on the sidelines for too long before just jumping in and trying something, as opposed to like, and then learning from that. And I think, over the course of your many launches, you've probably thrown a lot of stuff out there, tried a lot of things, and as a result, sort of learned a number of lessons. I want to dive a little bit deeper on just the lessons learned from the sort of double launch, because this is something that I do see as becoming more popular for creators that have ongoing series, and it might not necessarily, and feeling like they want that Kickstarter to, you know be bigger, and maybe to cut back on the total number of launches that they have to do, but shooting for the same results. And I've talked to some creators that, yeah, we like funding 2 issues at a time, but and you tried that. Like, what were the reasons that you were looking at doing the double launch, and then what was the sort of reality, or and walk me through a pros and cons calculus, and let's help creators that are maybe thinking about double size launches. What should they be thinking about?
Yeah, so the reason why we did it, I was looking at my buddy Curtis, Beastlands Curtis, and
Yep.
he consistently do that, and he was consistently getting like 30 grand or so per campaign, and I was looking at like sort of his offerings and his model. So that was a major factor, kind of looking at what Curtis was doing, and I thought that was like the main example that I was looking at. And also I just had the issues ready, like I had the material done ahead of time, and so I was, I guess in my mind, I was kind of in a rush, like production wise, or I was like, well, let me just like get these two out there, or try to do it. And my hope was that I would be able to get, like somewhere like, 35, 40 grand for the 2 issues, which just did not happen.
Mm.
I think there's a couple of things in hindsight. Like number one, the visibility, like it's hard for if you're changing your model, like if your audience is used to you launching two issues at a time, then maybe like it holds true. But I think like it's just kind of confusing. Like if I was one designing this current campaign, I was like looking at it and I was like, wow, man, like there's a lot of stuff that I just straight up missed on. Like if you look at this, there's no real indication that I'm doing 2 issues. There's maybe like a sentence or two, but it's not like immediately visible.
Mm.
So I don't know how much of that got across. There's a gap in sort of my account history. It's like, okay, I go from Glow book 1, 1 through 4, and then the trade, and then now it says 1 through 6. It doesn't mention 5 whatsoever. 5 is just kind of like gone in the records
Yeah.
somewhere. And I think like I very much was not building out this page. To your earlier point, like I ended up omitting some stuff that I had on earlier campaigns, and I was like, why did I do that? Like I'm just making this more unclear for new people to find me. Like it's less clear, there's less information, it's more condensed, and that seems like very counterintuitive now in hindsight. So those are kind of like the big mistakes that I made. I certainly don't think it was worth it financially. I do feel like I left money on the table. I do feel like I left time on the table. Like it meant a year-long gap. Like if I had spaced it out, it would have felt like I released a new issue like every 6 months, which feels a lot better than releasing 2 issues and then waiting a whole like year and a half to release like another issue, right? So
Yeah.
that was kind of a bummer. So like overall, like my assessment is I would not recommend it. I don't know what came over me as to like why I did it, and like 100% I would not do it again. Yeah, that's kind of basically, but also like I kind of wanted to ping this back to you, Tyler, because I know you do a lot. I mean, you do a bunch of campaigns. I know you manage like multiple brands besides your own ComixLaunch stuff.
Yeah.
And I know that you do plushies, you do this podcast, and as like a kind of a multi hyphenate creator, I think one of the things that happened to me was I kind of got caught up in it all, right? Like I was just trying to do everything, and like unfortunately the things that that I was not, paying as much attention to maybe was the comic stuff around this time as a Glow 5.6, because I was so knee deep in the tabletop role playing stuff, and that was a big growing segment for what I was doing and demanding a lot of attention and whatnot, and I just sort of like um candidly, like it was a bit of an afterthought to do these campaigns, and it was more of a like cut and paste job from previous campaigns, and just like, okay, let me add a couple things here, but like I did not give it the full like kind of thoroughness that I probably should have. And like I found that like in hindsight I can be like honest about that, but also like I'm trying to do more as a creator, as an entrepreneur, and all that stuff, right? Like I'm like growing the business. I'm doing these other things as a publisher, and like it's hard to balance all of those things at once, right? Hard to wear all of those hats, and like that's something that I've noticed. Some of the creators that I've looked up to that were like maybe a generation before me, like the Jason Brewbakers and the Jake Parkers of the world, right? Like
Yeah.
following them in their Kickstarters, and like Jake Parker at the time, he launched his big comic series, and he got a lot of angry backers because like he wasn't being communicative and stuff like that, right? But then he was like posting on Instagram, doing Inktober and all this stuff, and Brubaker went from Kickstarter, and then he did like webtoons, and like this like propensity to like want to do more and more and more, and kind of just like, okay, is it better to focus on like one or two lanes, right? And like just kind of go all in on those. Like that's kind of what I wonder out loud.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are great questions and great things that just remind you that at every stage, there's no stage where the problems just go away or the
Mm.
challenges just go away. You know, and also that like we so easily normalize success and change our expectations. For I'm sure for most creators out there, they would click on your last Glow campaign and see 784 backers and 22K raised. Like, what is he talking about? That's an overwhelming success, right? And on one hand, sure, absolutely, it is. It's a top 25 comic book project actually of all time. Like if you look at like statistics and what most projects do, but then at the same time, we can always, as entrepreneurs, as creators, as people that have high expectations for ourselves and always want to see growth, like we can always find the downside of that. And so yeah, I mean, it's something that we'll wrestle with, and something I say on the show a lot, and I try to practice what I preach, is the concept of like what you focus on grows, which is
Yeah.
absolutely true. But the correlate of that is there's only so much that you can focus on. Otherwise, you're not actually, it's not focus. And what you don't focus on, if it's not growing, it's probably it is often sliding. And I've definitely seen that with certain aspects of the business side of things. Like there'll be times where I'll throw myself 100% into one aspect of the brand, but inevitably that means that um the other stuff is going to slide unless I've put some sort of systems in place, or got support in that aspect, so that it's not my responsibility to keep that thing cooking. And so yeah, I'm with you on that. I did my first convention in a long time, as I said, this past weekend. And I've got two tables side by side of stuff across the many brands, the results of some of dozens of crowdfunding campaigns. But I do, from like a pulling myself back, also remember, in some ways my pitching and my conversion rate seems like it was higher when I had far less stuff on my table, and I could just focus on really nailing 2 to 3 great pitches, as opposed to having all of these books and all of this stuff on my table, but it can be visually overwhelmed. And so there are certain times where I'm like, man, should I be eliminating 30%, 40% of what I have on this table, so that I give more space to a few pitches that I can really cook in this particular setting. And it is one of those things where more is not always more.
Totally.
Um, I do wonder because in terms of doing the double launches, and I played with those for a couple launches this past year with Sync, um, and it was one thing that I did to try to make those double launches feel more appropriate is we treated those still as like one book to pitch. So even if it was two chapters, we gave that double-sized launch its own sort of unique name. And these were for the Sync project, and so I asked John, "Hey, write a solicit specifically for this book, but as the full-size book." What are the themes that maybe run across issues, or what's the connective tissue that make it feel like something that works. But I think you're probably right in terms of absolute funding. We probably left money on the table by doing it that way. I think part of the reason I was interested in doing those double launches, though, is because, well, we've got 3 or 4 other brands and projects that we're hoping to launching, and by not taking 2 spots, by taking 1 spot instead of 2 spots on the launch calendar, it frees us up to do other things. But I don't know that that's necessarily the best business decision. But is that part of why you might have also gone with a double size launch? It's like, oh,
Yeah,
this is
I
just one
think
of a
so.
few things.
Um, I can't recall specifically, but like I think the main thing was just having the material on hand, right? And just like having this like anxiousness to get it out there and be like,
Yeah.
well, I wanna get it made. I wanna release more if I can, and thinking that it would be like a good thing. But like again, in hindsight, it didn't work out. To kind of like the point of schedules and like limit, like there's only so much bandwidth, right? And so many campaigns you can, well, I don't know, I mean, like, I see creators like Pat Shand and like Caleb Baumquist doing like one a month now, and I'm like, wow, that's like, it's kind of crazy.
I think for Pat, one a month is a light month.
Yeah, I mean, that's nuts to me, and
Yeah.
good for him because he can make it work, obviously, and he does gangbusters on it. We tried that with MythWorks stuff in general. At the beginning of the year, we did Sancho and Blanco, which is like a dog series that I'm doing, a comic series. We did that to launch the year, and then we had a Zine Quest, a small RPG project, and both were like smaller projects. But we did, one after another, one in January, one in February, and like I just found myself like kind of burnt out from it, and I realized too that like I kept on rushing to the finish line with that stuff. Like I just like I was barely getting stuff on time. I was like finishing the page like right as we were launching. Never mind like trying to drum up support, press or whatever. It was just kind of like, okay, I just got to get this out and on to the next one. So deliberately, we're doing 2 this quarter. One another game one in addition to Glow. But like deliberately, we slowed down the schedule on that so I could do the whole like tooth to tail procedure, as we call it, kind of just like, okay, like let's make sure to really give this our focus. Let's make sure to try to drum up as much interest and as much awareness as possible. Go on podcasts, stuff like that, get on reviews, and just make sure to communicate as much as possible to existing fans and whatnot. I'm not sure like if there's going to be a super noticeable difference in terms of like the overall numbers, but I do know from like a creative standpoint, it does feel good, right? It feels like I did what I was supposed to do, and like I gave this project as much care and attention as it deserves, and I don't like that feeling of feeling like really fatigued and just like racing from one to another. So for me and sort of the projects that I'm doing, I think doing 1 to 2 a quarter is about right. I don't know if I can do any more than that. But also you do get into like scheduling things, right? It's like, well, how much of your audience can you tap at once? And what we're doing is, we're doing both a comic one and a game one this this quarter simultaneously. And I'm not sure what the crossover slash whether or not it's going to like meet maximum like saturation and stuff like that. And that's like kind of an interesting thing, I think, to think about. But I do know that, in addition to that, like my audience has been like very segmented between this comic stuff and this game stuff. And really it's like, because the game stuff has taken off so much, and like you said, my attention was focused on it since essentially 2021 for the last like 4 years. Like now, 80% of my audience, I would say, is like more of a tabletop audience. And that's been kind of interesting. And that's part of the reason why I started a MythWorks Comics Substack, a specific mailing list this year, because I was like, you know what, I want to get back to more of the like talking to my audience, like one-on-one, talking about like the creative process and that stuff, and build that audience there. And just to have a space for that. And that list is very small. It's only like I think I only have like 160 subscribers on that list. But again, it's like, it feels good to be able to have that space and to be able to have that outlet creatively, even if business wise, maybe it doesn't make as much sense. But like, I'm trying to, like it's creatively fulfilling for me to be able to talk to that. I think that's something that I've lost a little over the last couple of years. Like it started out with as like me and Vince, like making comics and talking to people directly on the Kickstarters, and then we kind of got into publishing, and then it became more about like Mythopoeia, and then MythWorks as we rebranded as a brand, and now like now we seem like this like totally legit like publishing company, but at the end of the day, it's still like me and Vince, and like we have one more person full-time helping us, and an accountant really, but like the expectations are like up here, right? And I think that's like one of the things. It's like, okay, like we've always been really good at the polish of the making of the thing and like the marketing side of things, but like we've always tried to push ourselves to do more and more and more, and like sometimes like things slip through the crack in terms of the back end, the logistics, the support and whatnot. And it's like, okay, like, well, how do we improve those things? But also like one of the things that makes people less patient with that is the perception of you as like a company versus like an individual. So that's something that like I've kind of wrestled with over the last like year or so, and like I'm trying to strike a balance between those things, and trying to present myself like not present myself as a creator, as someone, right, as an individual who's like trying to do my best, which I am genuinely like trying to do my best, and trying to grow and learn from it, as well as someone who also owns and runs this company, which has an outsized reputation to what it actually is at this point.
Yeah, it's and I think there's another strand. It's like there is great things that come with explosive growth and giant launches, and being viewed as like, oh, they're a legit thing. And then also there are some downsides. It's like, why didn't I like I sent you a customer service request on Saturday at midnight. Why are you not getting back to me until the following week? I expect my replacement parts like immediately. Talk to me a little bit though about, because I'm looking at some of your like the RPG projects. I guess like the Wild Sea was massive project, 135K, 2,600 backers. Like, how did you get into the RPG space, and like what are some things that you've sort of noticed about how maybe the tabletop and RPG community is maybe a little different than the comics community?
Yeah, we got into to RPGs. Like it was kind of the plan all along. We wanted to make a Skies of Fire RPG ever since that first issue. It just took us, however many years to do it. We did the first one in 2014, planned to make the RPG since like 2015, and around 2020 was the year. Like the end of 2019 was kind of when I mentally said to myself, all right, next year, that's the year I'm going to do RPGs. So that happened to be the pandemic year, so had a lot more kind of time to do that. Kind of dived headfirst into that stuff. Built a lot of broke bread with a lot of people, community building and stuff like that. Was just meeting grassroots, a lot of creators and stuff in various communities. One of the people that I met happened to be Felix Isaacs, the creator of the Wild Sea, and I play tested one of his a version of a Wild Sea like fairly early on, and then thought it was pretty cool. And he later DM'd me back and said, "Oh, like you're Ray Chou, creator of Glow. I didn't know that Glow is one of the chief inspirations for Wild Sea."
Wow.
And I was like, "Wow, that's like pretty. That's quite the coincidence, right?" And a little happenstance. So like me kind of putting one to one and seeing like an opportunity there, be like, well, we're trying to get into RPGs. I really like what you have here. Also, like the Wild Sea in terms of system, in terms of like its aesthetic, like the way it plays, very much was aligning with like what we were looking at and like learning in the RPG space. So it just like a lot of stuff was connecting all at once, and so that's how that kind of came about. And I saw the potential in that. I had like the expertise. I was able to leverage our existing kind of like list, because I was like, okay, I think this is a thing. I think like at the time, pre-backers, like a pre-launch page, that was like the big new feature in like 2021, right? Like
Yeah.
so like we managed to get like 600 or so like pre-backers, which is a good amount at any point. And just was able to kind of blow it up, and was really happy to see it blow up, and that's kind of how all of that came about. As far as the difference between the tabletop and the comics world, okay, so here's the main difference: is that the tabletop world has a better distribution system, has better B2B stuff, and has just a healthier industry as a whole. The reason why that is because you can sell a single issue of a comic on Kickstarter for about $15, right? 10 to $15 is kind of the going rate. You can sell a variant for $30, like a metal one for like $50 or whatever. You can't do that at a comic convention, right? Direct to consumer, everybody has to lower their prices. Like you have
It's
to,
tough. Yeah.
right? You got to sell at like $8, right? $7, $5 sometimes. And then when you talk about distribution, like you're talking about, like so like you're retailing it for $3.50, $5. Diamond gets half of that, so that's immediately $2.50, and then the comic book store gets half of that, so that's 75 cents. So you're literally making like 75 cents to $1.50 per issue, right? And it's like, okay, you go from crowdfunding, the direct-to-consumer online model, where you're making $15 per issue, and then you go distribution-wise, you're making $1.50 per issue, 75 cents. It just doesn't make any sense, right? There's just
Right.
no economic incentive to really do that.
Yeah. Unless you're printing in the digit plus, and even then, a big crowdfunding launch is still gonna dwarf what you're gonna
Yeah,
make in
yeah,
total end.
it's nuts. Whereas like if you do a board game, let's say, or a tabletop RPG, you can retail for direct to consumer. You're selling on Kickstarter for anywhere between 40 to $60, right? And then you're going to distribution, then you're getting let's say you're getting 30, 40 cents or 40% off of that, right? So although it's not as much as if you were selling to the consumer directly, you're still getting like 15, $20 or so, right? So like you can make that work. You can make that work at scale much more easy than you can doing a floppy for 75 cents or whatnot. And there's more distributors. There's off the top of my head, there's Alliance, which is owned by Diamond. I think they're still actually, Alliance was the main reason why they got purchased. Alliance was the only healthy division of the distribution business. So you got Alliance, you got ACD, you have Flat River Group. People buy games on Amazon, so that's like a legit distribution
Yep.
channel. Whereas like people kind of, but not really buy games or not games, comics on Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got graphic novels and top publishers, they sell a lot on Amazon. But
Yeah, right.
in terms of individual comics, like Amazon would destroy individual comics trying to get them to fulfill them.
Yeah, exactly. So there's just like there's the business of tabletop is a lot healthier than the business of comics just as a whole, and in the community stuff too. Like I think I'm finding it a little bit more, but I like in part of this campaign was like, okay, I need to re-engage in the the comics community, the indie comics community, and it's hard. It's hard. It's very fragmented. There's not a lot there. I was doing a bunch of research going around seeing like what comics news sites, blog sites there were. A lot of the stuff I was finding was like they were inactive, right? Inactive since like 2018, since like
Yeah.
2021. Like they'll just stop posting and stop like being a presence online. Whereas RPGs specifically, but tabletop too, like it's booming. There are content creators, and that's what really platformed us. Like we got a review for the Wild Sea and later Slug Blaster for this content creator called Quentin Smith, who did Shut Up and Sit Down, the big board game channel, but spun off into a RPG specific one, and that just completely transformed that side of the business, and just like absolutely platformed us and kind of what transformed that side completely. And I don't know if there's an equivalent in tabletop. If you look at the biggest YouTube creator or not tabletop and comics, I keep getting the two mixed up.
Yeah.
But if you look at like YouTube, like the biggest comics creator is probably like Comic Tropes, right? And Comic Tropes, like he's a comic historian ish, but he really only covers like the big two. Maybe some indie comics in terms of like the Image, the Booms of the world. But as far as like a pathway for new publishers and new creators, it just doesn't exist in the same way.
Yeah.
Tabletop, the same timeline in terms of the crowdfunding stuff. 2012, 2013, those are kind of the big initial years. So it's been around for about the same amount of time, and I would venture to say that the comic creators like you or me who also got their start around that time have about the same amount of experience. It's just that those tabletop people, they're able to transform them into actual legit companies, right? Like because there's the demand, the economy is there outside of crowdfunding, whereas like fundamentally something is just broken in comics. So like it's hard to make it work, right?
Yeah, and I guess part of me, I wonder about this in terms, and part of it is the long tail. Like for so much of comics, like the and part of it is like the historic like weekly release schedule, but it really does feel like you've got a very small window for ongoing sales for most comics. Now, of course, there's the outliers, right? I mean, a lot of like this comics for younger kids, like those are like Dogman will be selling for the next 40 years, most likely, in all of its collections, or like some of the Cat Kid comic clubs, the stuff like Raina Telemagier does. So and Walking Dead like has been in a million stuff, but for so many comics, it's like you get it out, you launch it, and then it kind of can easily disappear, and it's yesterday's news, and that's it's tough. And I compare that to what we've done with like the C is for Cthulhu brand, where if you can get something that kind of acts like a Dr. Seuss book, it can sell literally every day. And I don't think you can be a successful publisher if you don't have at least some products that have the ability to just be selling every single day in the background of your business, to be those sort of cash cows or tent poles. And it's very hard to achieve that in the comic space, I think. But I am curious, just because like right now on Kickstarter, like let's see what do we have here? Just pulling up their stats. in the game space, right? You know, I mean, comics is one thing, and comics like right now, we've got 289 live projects over in comics right now, but like in games, there's 683 live projects right now. So I do also wonder, you know, about the ability for, you know, like can the market really sustain that many projects launching all this, and do these RPGs have a better long tail, or is it still like, you know, the top 1% of 1% might do it, but most games are going to launch and then blip out? Like, I don't know, what's your experience, Ben, or what have you seen?
I definitely think that tabletop games as a whole, there is a bubble, and I think there's going to be a big reckoning, especially in the next, you know, year. I mean, is it time we talk about tariffs?
Well,
Like,
I mean, that is, I mean, games is one of the games and toys, you know, that's one of the main areas that right now it looks like will be heavily affected by
yes.
tariffs, and essentially have already been affected. But like, you're more tapped in on the RPG and game side of things. Like, what are some of the things that you've been hearing or seeing as a result of this stuff?
Yeah, it's bad news all around in the board game side. I mean, you're literally every 1 or 2 days there's a company that comes out as folding their operations and just like saying, you know, we're done. And these are big companies too, like Greater Than Games. They publish a very popular game called Spirit Island, which is called, you know, an evergreen, right? One that sells every single time. They're owned by Flat River Group, which I think is owned by Amazon, but they essentially just fired everyone, and now it's just the brand, right? Same thing with Cool Mini or Not. They just released. They just announced that they were essentially laying off all their development team. Cool Mini or Not, I read on Polygon that they have $21.6 million in outstanding crowdfunding projects that they have yet to fund.
Oh,
$21.6 million. So I do think there's a huge bubble in board games that are probably about to burst because of the ongoing economic situation. I do want to separate board games from tabletop role playing games a little bit. Tabletop role playing games are a much smaller fragment. So if you look at the tabletop industry, essentially half of it is dominated by collectible card games. That's the biggest category, Magic.
yeah. I mean, can you break, like, I am, uh, I've been a game designer. And you know, but most of my games were in ed tech and stuff in the past. I'm not a big game. I'm not a big gamer person, so I don't necessarily know exactly what the difference between all of these things are. So
Yeah.
like what are the major, like, just little basic definitions for the non-game experts
Yeah.
around here?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about in the same way that the comics have the direct market, and the direct market refers to comic book stores. The tabletop industry has the hobby and specialty games market, which is essentially board game stores.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about that specifically right now. So this is kind of discounting your Cards Against Humanities, your Unos, really. Although I hear like Uno is like the number one seller across like all like board game stores. Funny enough, talking about evergreens, but anyway. So
Yeah.
if you go into a board game store, the number one selling thing at all of these things, besides Uno, if that's like number one selling, but the number one selling thing is almost always Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and so on and so forth. As a percentage of the specialty board game industry as a whole, it represents about 50%. And then from that, miniatures, so like Warhammer, stuff like that, right? Miniature war games. It's about half the size of the collectible card game market,
Okay.
and that's the second biggest category. And then after that is board games. So your Settlers of Catan, your Carcassones, your Wingspans. That's about half of that. About half of the miniature market is board games, and then about half of that is tabletop role playing games. So tabletop role playing games are like the comics of the game sector. Like they're the most niche thing out there. It didn't used to be the case. Like the tabletop role-playing games in the 70s were the biggest thing, but they're not the biggest thing anymore. However, tabletop
And that was
role-play.
like Dungeons and Dragons is
Yep.
like the typical or the tentpole thing that or the origin
Yep.
of tabletop RPG. Okay.
Yeah.
And for a tabletop RPG, assuming you need a tabletop, what else do you need, or what else is common?
You don't even need a tabletop, man. You just need, like, people play them all over like Discord or Zoom calls or Google Meets now. You just need that, a dice roller, and some sort of way to keep yourself organized. So like Google Sheets is a way that they put their characters on. Mural, virtual tabletops are becoming more and more prevalent. So Roll20 is the big one. Roll20 is like a big player in the space. They have, like, not only Roll20, but they own DriveThru RPG, which is the biggest online platform to buy role-playing games. But specifically right now in this moment, in 2025, indie RPGs are having a moment where the segment is growing. I think the statistics were this year it was a little bit more flat, but the last like 3 or 4 years, the tabletop role-playing segment has grown like 20 to 40% year in, year out. So like compounding, like so it's gaining a lot of momentum, a lot of steam. A lot of people think that tabletop role-playing games are kind of where board games were at in 2011 or so. So like it's having this kind of exponential gold rush moment right now. But that being said, like if you look at the role-playing game segment, Dungeons and Dragons is still like the biggest thing by far, right? Over 50%, maybe like 60-70%, to the point where tagging your stuff as D&D versus like TTRPG or RPG is way more effective than anything else. So if you're a content creator, you're making RPG content, you pretty much have to tag it as D&D if you're looking to increase your numbers. Like that's the big ugly dragon in the room. But Wizards has done a lot of dumb things like over the past couple of years. Like they basically they're in huge financial trouble right now because they put all their eggs in the Dungeons and Dragons movie last year. But last year they like, the one side of the corporation was not talking to the other, so they knew they had this movie which they invested essentially like $1 billion in terms of like it's like $300 million to make and another that much to market it, right? And plus they bought like the actual movie studio to make this freaking movie.
Yeah.
So they put like $1 billion into this thing, and it was a good movie, right? Did you see the Dungeons and Dragons?
I saw it. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun, right? So it kind of had all the ingredients to be like this massive hit, but like the actual people running the tabletop side of things, they decided to remove the open license of D&D, or try to remove the open license of D&D 3 months before that thing released, and that caused everyone to turn against them.
Meaning like you could no longer say D&D compatible, or
they wanted a fee. They wanted a cut of everything. Essentially, like they wanted a cut of Critical Role's money, right? Like that's like the big driver. So like imagine 3 months before the biggest investment of your company ever, you do that, you piss off your hardcore fans, right? Like it's like the biggest, like that's going to be studied in business schools for like decades to come. It's like one of the dumbest things like you could have ever done. But it comes from like leadership coming in, right? And like the new leadership team of Wizards is like it comes from Microsoft. They want to turn the thing into like a SaaS service, right? So they're like, okay, well, we need to guardian everything. So why are people like making free content for this and we're not getting a cut of it? Like that doesn't make sense to us. And like you're right, it doesn't make sense if you're trying to do that, but like you just don't understand what the thing is.
Right. So. Yeah. I guess it'd be like Marvel, like suddenly like you're no longer allowed to draw our characters. Or something like that, and post it online.
It's as if they went, like if they started going after artists in Artist Alley for fan art, right? Like, and everyone knows it's like you're not, like it's kind of a legal gray area, right? Like it's like you're not really supposed to use their characters, but everyone kind of does, and some people have permission, but not everybody has permission, but they just kind of let it go because that's the entire industry, really.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. And it's funny because Marvel has also been dinged for dropping the ball in terms of coordinating like comic releases with their movie efforts, and not using the movies to promote the the comic side of things, and just not tapping into what seem to be, clear synergies there, leaving a lot of money on the table. But it's interesting that, Wizard seems to have done something, equally dumb.
Oh, I mean, it's
Yeah.
whatever Marvel did. Like, I honestly think it pales in comparison to Hasbro. I mean, they're in so much trouble right now because of it. Like, they are just hemorrhaging money. Their stock, their stock price dipped a lot because of the tariff stuff. But really, it was like they basically went all in on this D&D movie, and it has not panned out, which is unfortunate because it's actually a good movie. And in another universe,
it seemed like it was going to be like the start of like a great franchise or something like that.
Yeah, totally, right. And like another universe, they're about to release the second one like next year or even this summer, right? Yeah. And like so.
Yeah. So like a question I have for you, because like one thing that I've noticed that is super common in the game space, and to the point where I almost feel like, and I'm we've been talking about rolling out and launching a C is for Cthulhu board game for a while, and we've got some initial plans and stuff in the works, and it's something I want to do, presuming that it doesn't become impossible. But one thing that I see in the game space is this whole sort of like global, worldwide friendly shipping thing, which is basically like, I assume in most cases that means that fulfillment is being done outside of the United States, or at least partially done outside of the United States. And I'm wondering if that's the case, does that leave room for these companies to dodge the tariffs potentially with their fulfillment, or are people still getting screwed? And I'm also curious, like if you have fulfillment projects or games that you're trying to navigate this tariff thing.
Yeah. So it's I guess I have to be a little bit delicate with the language here, but like it is it really depends on your import of record. Right? Who's on the paperwork bringing this stuff in, and there's so many companies that have built up because of crowdfunding. Like there's a whole industry, right? There's a whole industry supporting fulfillment, distribution, all that stuff. And part of it is you have a number of companies who are handling fulfillment in the UK and Europe, who then will also say to you, like, we can act as the import of record. And therefore, we absorb sort of the thing and whatnot. Like usually when those EU tariff friendly, what that means is really that's baked into the price of things, right? It's not like somebody doesn't have to pay those. It's just that they're kind of shielding the backers, the supporters, the customers from that. They're just kind of baking in into the price is what it means. So as compared to like the comic book crowdfunding scene, though, like most creators, I think in comics still fulfill themselves unless like you're like a Boom or Image or something like that, right? So the people in board games, because there's more of an industry, like you will be able to find these fulfillment companies, these 3PLs, these other entities who are willing to import things for you into these specific places because they have the paperwork, they know how it's done. Ostensibly, like with EU and UK stuff, like kind of funny. So MythWorks has we're above board for both the UK and the EU as a foreign company, meaning we have like the VAT registration and all that stuff, and we pay an accounting firm thousands of dollars of years to have us above board. But we did it under the premises. Well, number one, Vince is Italian, so like we always kind of had one foot in both, so it always kind of made sense for us to figure that stuff out. But we also did it because at a certain point you're supposed to get that VAT refunded off of like consumer sales, right? So like they'll charge you for like if you bring in 5,000 copies of a book and they charge you like a 10% VAT on that in Germany or whatever, like you pay that money up front, but then you get rebated, I think all of it or maybe like most of it as you make consumer sales. Like that's how the system works. And we're like, oh great, so like we'll get the money back eventually. We have yet to see the money back from that. Like it's kind of a bureaucratic mess. It's like you just have to have the patience to chase it. So that's the major advantage of like doing it yourself and registering yourself. Like you're able to reclaim that VAT money off of the consumer goods sold. Whereas if you go through another company, like that company technically can claim that refund basically
Yeah.
and make a little bit more. I don't know how many of them are doing it because it's a bureaucratic nightmare.
Right.
But it technically that's how it works.
Interesting. Because yeah, and I've heard that the way some game like there was some game publisher that just basically said like, hey, we've got this Kickstarter, we are not fulfilling anything until this tariff situation is revised, and I mean it makes sense, and I especially feel for crowdfunding projects that may be wrapped up in January or early February and placed their order, spent thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars on product, and then being faced with a 145% bill once that stuff hits American shores. Like you can see how that could be devastating to everybody's bottom line, especially in the pre-order world. It's one thing to like, all right, if this is the new reality, to be placing orders and knowing that such that you can price for it or anything like that. It's a completely other thing when you're in the pre-order world, and then suddenly to have this unexpected massive surcharge. And so yeah, I've been talking with a number of folks that are just trying to wrestle through this, and we have 3 plush toy prototypes, actually four actually, that one order has already been placed, so not much I can do about it now, and then three other new products that we were planning on launching very soon, but it's definitely has me in I need to know if these are going to be 145% more expensive than what is currently being quoted, that I have to cut that check to somebody. So it just makes it very hard to make decisions there.
Yeah, I mean we're caught up in it too. So we have a game, Slug Blaster Game of the Year edition, that is a box set, which is like I don't know why I did this, because like RPGs, like they're books, so depending on like there's different kind of literature for both. So, like you can maybe file it under like 4909 or whatever the book tariff is, right, which is 0% exempt as far as we understand it. But this one has dice and other stuff in it, so it's like we really can't, and it's already done, it's reprinted, and now it's like I'm just like I am not bringing it over because I don't want to get charged. I can't get charged the 145 because it's about 30K worth of product. So like that's about 45 grand or whatever, right? If it gets tariffed, and I don't have that capital. I don't.
Who's sitting on an extra? Who's sitting on that much money of extra taxes on top of what you're gonna have to pay for?
Yeah. So taxes, actually, today one of my tasks is like after I get off this call, like I have to communicate that with. And we're taking pre-orders on our website, right? And I have like 300, 400 pre-sold because it's a reprint. And I need to communicate that. And I need to like communicate basically like, hey, this is the situation. We need to wait on this and pray and write to Congress and all that stuff. And try and get it down to hopefully 0, but if not 0, something more reasonable, right? Something that's not 145%. And then simultaneously, we're trying to do like we had planned like an expansion pack for this game, right? And that's my next campaign that I'm trying to launch this quarter. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, okay, how do I navigate all of this? Because the reason why we're doing that expansion pack is to partially pay off for this reprint run, right? It's like, yeah, to create new content, but I want to sell more pre-orders of this thing. And I'm like, okay, like, what do I do? And like, as a small business, really, like I need the money, right? I need the cash flow, unfortunately. So it's just it's a tricky situation all around. I oscillate, like, to be honest, like I spent yesterday just like paralyzed because I was like, I just was like, what am I going to do? What are we going to do? And it just like, I just did not, I was super depressed and did not just want to face reality essentially with it. And I know I'm not the only one, and I know the entire board game sector is in the same place. But the thing is that like board games and plushies and toys, like, yeah, like we are feeling it right now, and a lot of the news is coming out specifically about these segments. But we're not the only ones, right? Like we're like, if this tariff stuff holds in about 60 days, you're not going to find, you're going to go to Target and Walmart or wherever, and there's going to be tons of missing product. There's going to
Yeah.
be lots of stuff that, and so it's going to hit the consumers like hard very soon, like in about a quarter, right? And
Yeah.
we're just the canary in the coal mine right now. And I don't think, I don't know, it's like, it's this weird situation. Even with us, it's like the entire board game industry is doing this. So like, I think everyone in the back of their mind is hoping that like, you know, rational heads will prevail and like we'll be able to do business again.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, I mean, this is just the beginning. It's going to get real ugly really soon, you know? So I don't know if like the US consumer understands that, but that's what's coming down the pipeline, essentially.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, you know, there's part of me that's like, you know, it's the whole, you know, F around and find out. And maybe that's
Real.
what needs to happen to like for this insanity to finally stop. But at the same time, like, I don't want to cancel all plans and just like have, you know, wasted time on the schedule simply because we're waiting for this inevitable outcome. Um, and I honestly I hope we don't have to endure, you know, a Christmas where every toy is 2 to 3 times more expensive than it was last year, and shelves are empty, and people are panicking, and nobody's spending because that we do have so many small businesses that are, you know, suddenly having to, you know, cut back and everything. So yeah, you know, I'm with you. I appreciate you just sort of, you know, being honest about, hey, you know, we can have all of this experience, ton of success and everything, but when we're thrown these new curveballs, like, hey, we don't always have all the answers. And I sort of like, you know, a vendor that I work with on those plush toys, like they do really high end, cool other collectible things for their own brand, and they're sort of with it. It's just like, are you know, are they going to get a massive bill on the FedEx package that's already on the way to them? Like, yeah, it's scary and it's no fun. And it's hard to create and just, you know, be positive and be productive creatively when you've got these massive sort of swords of Damocles swinging over our shoulders, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, like, you know, I'm sorry, like, if, you know, people listening are like, you know, we're kind of getting into like political territory, but it's like, this is kind of where the rubber meets the road in terms of like, you know, this is commerce, right? This is
Yeah.
us as creators and entrepreneurs talking about this. And it's like, yeah, it's going to hit the bottom line very, very quickly. But, you know, it's just one of a number of things that is going on simultaneously, right? So I really think now more than ever, like what I've noticed too is that like been this interesting kind of phenomenon where like right around COVID, people were very active and vocal about like communicating stuff, right? But
Yeah.
like since then, it feels like people are just like very muted right now. Like people, like despite all that's going on, people are like kind of scared to like say stuff, you know, and that's
I,
it's
yeah. I mean, I'm seeing that like for the first time ever as an American, I've had to think twice about stuff that I'd post because in the back of my mind, I'm like, huh, I wonder, let's see if they've already have these algorithms that are screening social media accounts for people's for student visa or people here on student visas. It would not be there. It would be simple to like, hey, you know, let's also run one of these to decide which businesses we're going to target for IRS auditing. Why
yeah,
not? You know,
yeah.
and so yeah, I'm with you, and I do feel that I think people are a little bit more shell shocked and just like, you know, see the writing on the wall as not good, but also it does feel like oddly like there it feels like there should be a lot more reaction than it seems like there is, given what's going on. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, for real. So I urge it. What I'm going to do, and I'm gonna make content around it too, is that like as a company, like I am going to write as the CEO of MythWorks. I'm going to write like my Congress representatives, not just mine, but like all of Congress, right, and be like, hey, this is what's happening to us. This directly affects like my bottom line, and I'm gonna mail like physical letters, and spend $1,000 doing that to all like 550 members. But it's like we more than ever during this time, like we need to be exercising these levers of democracy, frankly, right, of like what our government is, because like if we're not doing it now, when the heck are we going to do it, right? And it's like, yeah, this is commerce, this is affecting my bottom line, but like this is what it is, right? Like you like if like there is a collective kind of like dampening of silencing that's going on, and it's like we got to say something, we got we got to stand up, like, because if not, it's just going to keep happening, and who knows what's going to happen if that holds to be true.
Yeah, and I saw a quote one time. It was something to the effect of like, your happiness will be largely determined on the amount of time you spend focused on stuff that's in your own control versus stuff that's outside of your own control. And I do feel like my happiness has gone down as I've been focusing on all this shit that's out of our control, or I don't have direct control over. But I think what you've just laid out there is, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's not under our control, but there are things that we can do, even though, as Americans, as people, living in functional democracies while we still, have them. And so putting your focus there, putting your focus on still trying to create your best work, still trying to tap into the reasons that you started doing this in the very first place, and going back to that audience and back to what made you get started with this, and making really good work. I think those are all things that can help us get through these challenging times, and those are the things that have always helped people get through challenging times, focusing on what you can do to bend the world positively towards your vision for it. So I think that's I'm glad that you're doing that, and I want to try to commit to taking similar actions myself. So thanks for that, Ray. Well, we're coming up, we're over an hour now, and it's been, I'm sure we could keep going for forever, but I know you've got stuff on your plate, as do I. The project that is live right now is called Glow. It's there's 7 issues that you can get all caught up on. Any particular pledge or thing that you want to highlight about this project before we wrap things?
Yeah, like if you've heard of Glow, if you've backed us before, thank you so much. I could really use your support in bringing not just this issue but the future of the project to life. So if you have like $6 to spare, $9 to spare, that would be really good at the digital tiers. And if you're new to the series, we have a bunch of catch-up tiers that hopefully will get you started on the comic right away. And yeah, like please check it out. It's a great series in my opinion. It's good for kids. It's good for all ages. It's a lot of fun, and yeah, I appreciate any and all support that you can throw my way.
Awesome, Ray. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me and talk through some of this stuff. We're going to get through it. We're going to figure it out one way or another, my friend. But thanks for being here and sharing your insights with the ComixLaunch audience.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler.
All right, have a great one. Everyone else out there in ComixLaunch land, hope you are staying focused on stuff that's in your control. Mostly. It's okay to occasionally watch some stuff that's gonna fire you up, but let's continue to do our best work out there, and we can't wait to see what you launch next. Take care, everybody.